On a quiet Sunday evening, the kind that carries a heavy stillness, the residue of a long, draining week, I found myself unable to hide from the truths I usually buried. It was the kind of evening where even small deceits lose their grip and self-deception falls away. And in that fragile space, a single sentence slipped from my lips and shattered the life I had built with the man I once believed to be my soulmate. I hadn't intended to hurt him. I didn't even know he was within hearing range. The words weren't shouted in anger, nor were they carefully chosen. They simply tumbled out, unguarded, thoughtless. And in doing so, they dismantled everything we had spent years constructing together. That evening, my closest friend, Sarah, had dropped by for what was meant to be a casual visit. We sat in the living room, its soft lighting and warm furnishings creating a cocoon of comfort. A bottle of wine sat between us, half empty, loosening tongues and lowering defenses. I thought Nathan, my husband, was upstairs, occupied with something in the storage room. I had no reason to believe he might be listening. Our conversation turned personal, more of a confession than a dialogue. I was overwhelmed, exhausted. Months of friction had taken their toll. Arguments that ended in silence, days that passed in cold distance, and a fatigue that reached down to my bones. At one point, pressing my temples to ease the ache growing in my head, I whispered, almost to myself, "I don't know, Sarah, some days, I just wish I hadn't married him." The words hit the air with a finality I hadn't anticipated. Sarah looked up sharply, her eyes wide, her voice urgent. "You don't mean that." But I wasn't so sure. Part of me did mean it. In that moment, from a place of weariness, where love had begun to feel more like duty than desire. When affection turns into routine, and routine into regret, even love can feel suffocating. Yet another part of me did still love him. At least I thought I did. Unseen by us, Nathan had been on the staircase. He had heard everything. The next morning something was off. The kitchen was too quiet. The coffee maker, always brewing by the time I came down, was untouched. His keys weren't in their usual place by the front door. His boots, lined up neatly every morning, were missing. I assumed he'd left early for work, though unease quickly replaced that logic. Nathan had never once left without a goodbye. Not even when we were angry. Not even when it was hard. By noon, I started to worry. I called his phone, no answer. I texted, nothing. Hoping for clarity, I opened my laptop to email him at work. But before I could compose a message, I saw an unread email already waiting. Its subject line read only one word: farewell. He had written, "I overheard you last night. I wasn't meant to, but I did." Those words weren't spoken in anger. They were your truth. And that truth shattered me. I poured my entire soul into us. And all this time, you've been carrying this regret. Don't look for me. The divorce papers are already filed. I'm not bitter. I just refuse to be someone's regret. Signed, Nathan. I couldn't breathe. I read the message again and again, as if repetition might soften its impact. There was no anger in his tone, no accusation, no desperate plea. Just a quiet decision. A final door closing. I drove to his office in a panic, only to learn he'd resigned that very morning. His desk was already cleared. By afternoon, his phone had been disconnected. His social media wiped clean. Our mutual friends hadn't heard a word, and his brother only said that Nathan had asked not to be contacted. He had vanished completely, deliberately. A few days later, the divorce papers arrived. Perfect. Untouched. My name printed neatly. The process already in motion. His signature there, bold and unwavering. My role reduced to a formality, just a signature to complete the unraveling. I waited for the anger to come. Waited for blame, denial, tears of rage. But none came. Only guilt. Deep, relentless guilt. I thought back to the man I had married. His eyes, filled with devotion. The way he listened when I struggled to speak. How he stood strong during my weak moments. The quiet kindness he offered without asking for anything in return. Even during our recent struggles, I could remember his expression at dinner days before, tired, Yes, but still trying. He hadn't given up. I had. Sleep eluded me for weeks. My mind replayed the moment with Sarah endlessly. I questioned why I had said it, whether I truly meant it, whether it had just been exhaustion or fear or loneliness talking. But the damage was done. And Nathan had taken my words not as a passing frustration, but as confirmation of something he had feared all along. I even hired a private investigator. But there were no leads, no address, no digital trail. He had disappeared completely, erasing himself from our shared life. And over time, I began to understand. What he heard that night wasn't just painful, it was clarity. It was the moment he realized I had stopped choosing him. And he, in turn, chose not to stay where he was unwanted. Now, I think of him often. I wonder where he's gone, if he's happy, if someone else now wakes up beside him and sees him for the treasure he always was. Someone who says, without hesitation or regret, I'm glad I married you. Asterisk because in the clarity of hindsight, I now know he was the greatest choice I ever made. But that realization came far too late. Nathan left to protect what little of himself he had left. And in doing so, he took with him the chance to make things right. All that remains now is the silence he left behind, and the echo of a careless confession I can never take back.